On a scorching afternoon in July 2019, peaceful facade of suburban bliss was irrevocably shattered, leaving the community haunted for years. At the heart of this tragedy were the Henderson. Thaddeus, a 45-year-old investment banker known for his work ethic and community involvement, and his wife Margot, 43-year-old part-time yoga instructor, celebrated for her vibrant personality and infectious laugh. Their seemingly perfect marriage, envied by many, had made them fixtures in the community for over a decade. Next door, the Coopers lived. Elaine, a widow, and her 19-year-old son Liam, college sophomore, home for the summer. Coopers had moved in 5 years prior, and while they kept more to themselves than most, were generally well-liked by their neighbors. No one could have predicted how these ordinary lives would catastrophically collide. Thaddeus, driven by ambition, was born to working-class parents in rural Iowa and had clawed his way up the social ladder through sheer determination and an almost obsessive work ethic. By his early 30s, he had established himself as a rising star at a financial company, admired by colleagues for his sharp analytical mind and by clients for his no-nonsense approach to wealth management. Margot Sinclair, as she was known before marriage, had a different trajectory. The daughter of a college professor and an artist, she grew up valuing creativity and self-expression. She studied modern dance at university, dreaming of a stage career, but a knee injury in her senior year derailed those plans, leading her to pivot toward yoga and wellness coaching. Their paths crossed at a charity gala in 2003. Thaddeus, already successful but socially awkward, was immediately drawn to Margot's vivacity and charm. For Margot, Thaddeus represented stability and the promise of a comfortable life that would allow her to pursue her passions without financial worry. They married a year later in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of their social circle. The early years of their marriage were happy ones. Thaddeus's career continued to flourish, and he took pride in providing Margot with the life he felt she deserved. Margot threw herself into being the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties and attending social events crucial for Thaddeus's networking. She also began teaching yoga part-time at an upscale studio, finding fulfillment in helping others achieve balance and inner peace. But as the years passed, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed life. Thaddeus's work hours grew longer, his ambition pushing him to chase ever bigger deals and clients. He was rarely home before 9 p.m., and even when he was, his mind was often elsewhere, constantly checking his phone for emails or market updates. Margot, approaching her 40s, felt increasingly restless. The yoga classes and charity committees that once filled her days now felt hollow. She began to question the choices that had led her to this point, wondering if she had traded her dreams for a gilded cage. Their failure to conceive, despite years of trying, added another layer of strain to their relationship. By the summer of 2019, the Hendersons' marriage was a carefully maintained facade. The outside world, they still appeared to be the golden couple. Thaddeus continued to excel at work, recently closing a deal that put him in line for a partnership, while Margot's yoga classes were more popular than ever, her students drawn to her warmth and apparent serenity. Behind closed doors, they were virtual strangers. Conversations, when they happened, were perfunctory and centered around schedules and social obligations. Physical intimacy had become a rare occurrence, each touch laden with unspoken resentments and unfulfilled expectations. Neither Thaddeus nor Margot was willing to admit, even to themselves, how far they had drifted apart. It was easier to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage than to confront the emptiness that had grown between them. Little did they know that this unacknowledged chasm in their relationship would become the catalyst for a tragedy that would shatter not just their lives, but the entire community of Riverside. The Coopers had moved next door to the Hendersons in 2014, following the death of Elaine Cooper's husband, Dr. Reginald Cooper, a respected oncologist. Reginald had succumbed to the very disease he had spent his life fighting, leaving Elaine to raise their son Liam alone. Elaine, a soft-spoken librarian, initially struggled to adjust to life in the new community. The move from their modest home in St. Paul had been necessary to escape the memories haunting every corner of their old house. But the affluent suburb felt alien to her. She found solace in her books and tending to the garden that soon became the envy of the neighborhood. Liam Cooper was 14 when they moved in, a lanky, introverted teenager, more comfortable with computers than people. The transition to a new school had been difficult, and he often found himself the target of bullies who mocked his second-hand clothes and quiet demeanor. During this time, Thaddeus Henderson took Liam under his wing, offering him a job mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Over the next 5 years, Liam blossomed, growing into a handsome young man, his natural intelligence finally finding an outlet in his computer science studies at university. Despite his growing confidence, Liam remained devoted to his mother, worrying about her isolation and loneliness, and making a point of coming home most weekends, even when his friends were planning parties or road trips. It was on one of these weekend visits in early June that he first saw Margot Henderson in a new light. Elaine had always been grateful for the Hendersons' kindness, particularly Margot's efforts to include her in neighborhood activities. She often spoke of Margot's generosity, unaware of the complex emotions brewing beneath the surface of her son's polite nod. The spark that ignited the affair between Margot Henderson and Liam Cooper was as unexpected as it was intense. It happened on a balmy evening in early June during one of the Hendersons' legendary summer barbecue. Thaddeus, as usual, was holding court near the grill, regaling his colleagues with tales of his latest financial coup. Margot, feeling particularly isolated amidst the crowd, retreated to the relative quiet of the pool house to replenish the ice bucket. Liam, who had been reluctantly dragged to the party by his mother, chose that moment to seek refuge from the noise and forced socializing. He entered the pool house, not realizing it was occupied, and found Margot struggling with a large bag of ice. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something shifted. He moved to help her with the ice, their hands brushing. They stood there, momentarily frozen, the cold of the ice contrasting sharply with the heat building between them. It was Margot who broke the silence, her voice husky as she thanked him. Liam, usually so articulate, found himself stammering in response. That brief encounter set the stage for what was to come. Over the next few weeks, Margot and Liam found themselves manufacturing reasons to be in each other's company. It started innocently enough, Margot asking Liam for help with her laptop, Liam offering to help in her garden. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of attraction that they both tried to ignore. Their first kiss happened almost a month after the barbecue. Liam had been helping Margot set up for one of her yoga classes in the park. As they finished, a sudden summer storm broke out. They ran for shelter under a nearby gazebo, laughing and breathless as the rain poured down around them. Margot looked at Liam and felt a surge of desire she hadn't experienced in years. Before she could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. From that point, their affair escalated quickly. They were reckless, driven by a combination of Liam's youthful passion and Margot's desperation to feel alive again. They met in secluded spots around town, in the back row of the local cinema, in a hidden corner of the public library, and most dangerously in the Henderson home when Thaddeus was at work. Each encounter left them craving more, the gulf in their ages forgotten in the heat of their stolen moments. Margot felt rejuvenated, rediscovering parts of herself she thought long lost. Liam was intoxicated by Margot's experience and the taboo nature of their relationship. But as the summer wore on, the strain of maintaining their secret began to show. Close calls became more frequent, neighbor almost catching them in an embrace, a suspicious glance from Elaine when Margot's name came up too often in conversation. The guilt, too, started to weigh on them both. Liam struggled with the knowledge that he was betraying Thaddeus, a man who had been nothing but kind to him. Margot found herself lying more and more to her husband, each deception another crack in the foundation of her marriage. Yet despite the risks and the guilt, neither seemed able to end the affair. They were caught in a whirlwind of passion and need, blind to the devastating consequences that loomed on the horizon. July 15, 2019, dawned hot and humid, the air heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. It was a Monday, and Riverside stirred to life as its residents prepared for another week of work and routine. For Thaddeus Henderson, it began like any other day. He rose early, donned one of his impeccably tailored suits, and left for the office before Margot had even stirred from sleep. Margot woke later, her mind already racing with plans for the day ahead. Thaddeus had informed her the night before that he would be working late. Crucial client dinner could seal his partnership deal. For Margot, this meant an opportunity. She sent a text to Liam, her heart racing as she suggested he come over in the afternoon. Liam, who had been agonizing over his involvement with Margot, hesitated. The affair had consumed his thoughts, his summer job, and time with friends falling by the wayside. His feelings for Margot had deepened, but so had his fear of discovery. Yet when her message came through, he found himself unable to resist. He replied in the affirmative, pulse quickening at the thought of seeing her again. Around 2 p.m., Liam arrived at the Hendersons' home, a surge of adrenaline making his hands shake slightly as he rang the doorbell. Margot opened the door, her smile bright, but her eyes betraying a similar nervous energy. They retreated to the living room, the house's silence amplifying the tension between them. Their initial kisses were hurried, almost frantic, but as they settled into the familiarity of each other's arms, the world outside seemed to fade away. They were lost in their own bubble of stolen intimacy, oblivious to the ticking clock. At 3:45 p.m., the bubble burst. Thaddeus, having forgotten a crucial file, returned home unexpectedly. He entered through the back door, his mind preoccupied with the evening's impending meeting. The sounds that greeted him as he walked down the hall brought him to a sudden, chilling halt. Margot's laughter, mixed with a deeper voice he recognized but couldn't immediately place, drifted from the living room. He moved silently toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. The scene that met his eyes was one he would never be able to erase from his memory. Margot and Liam, so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice his presence, were caught in a moment of unmistakable intimacy. Thaddeus felt a white-hot rage explode within him, his vision narrowing to a tunnel as he took in the betrayal. His voice, when it finally broke through the haze of anger, was low and dangerous, a single word that sliced through the room like a knife. Margot. The shock on their faces might have been comical if the situation weren't so dire. Margot scrambled away from Liam, her face paling as she tried to formulate an explanation. Liam stood frozen, his mind racing but his body betraying him by staying rooted to the spot. Thaddeus's eyes flicked between the two, his mind a maelstrom of emotions. The confrontation that followed was brutal. Thaddeus, usually so composed, was a torrent of fury and heartbreak. Margot's attempts to explain were drowned out by his accusations and demands for answers. Liam, finding his voice, tried to apologize. Thaddeus's rage was implacable. In a moment of reckless abandon, Thaddeus lunged at Liam. The young man, driven by instinct, defended himself. The two men grappled, their struggle moving through the living room and into the hall. It was an uneven match, Thaddeus's fury giving him a strength that Liam couldn't counter. In the chaos, family heirloom, a heavy brass candelabra, was knocked from its place on the mantel. Thaddeus, reaching for anything to gain the upper hand, grabbed it and swung. The blow connected with sickening force. Liam crumpled to the floor, blood pooling rapidly beneath his head. Margot's scream echoed through the house, a sound that would haunt Thaddeus for the rest of his life. The aftermath was a blur of panic and disbelief. Thaddeus, horrified by what he had done, sank to his knees beside Liam, his hands trembling as he checked for a pulse. Margot, sobbing uncontrollably, called for an ambulance, her voice barely coherent as she tried to explain what had happened. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, began to gather outside, their faces masks of concern and curiosity. Police arrived first, followed closely by paramedics. Liam was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead upon arrival. Thaddeus was taken into custody, his suit stained with Liam's blood, his expression one of dazed disbelief. Margot, left alone in the house that had once been her sanctuary, crumpled to the floor, her sobs the only sound in the now ruined Henderson home. The news spread quickly through Riverside, the shocking violence upending the lives of everyone who heard it. Thaddeus Henderson was charged with second-degree murder, the trial becoming a media sensation. Margot, grappling with her grief and guilt, withdrew from the public eye, her once vibrant presence in the community reduced to a ghost of her former self. The Coopers, devastated by the loss of Liam, eventually moved away, unable to bear the memories that haunted every corner of their home. The tragedy left an indelible mark on Riverside, a reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives can be torn apart by a single catastrophic moment of passion and rage. The trial of Thaddeus Henderson captivated the community of Riverside and garnered national attention. The courtroom was filled daily with reporters, curious onlookers, and a somber mix of friends and family. From Margot was called to the stand, her testimony a painful recounting of the affair and the events leading up to that fateful afternoon. Her once vibrant demeanor was now subdued, her eyes hollow as she recounted the details of her relationship with Liam and the moment Thaddeus walked in on them. Her voice broke several times, tears streaming down her face as she described the guilt and shame she felt. Elaine Cooper also testified, her grief palpable as she spoke of her son's kindness and the tragic end that befell him. She described the positive influence Thaddeus had initially had on Liam's life, making the eventual betrayal and violence all the more poignant. The jury deliberated for days, the weight of the decision heavy on their shoulders. In the end, Thaddeus was found guilty of manslaughter rather than second-degree murder, the jury believing that while his actions were undeniably violent, they were not premeditated. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, the possibility of parole after 10 years. The sentence brought little comfort to those affected. Margot, burdened by guilt and the loss of her marriage and her lover, retreated into herself. She sold the house and moved away, seeking anonymity in a new town where no one knew her past. Elaine, unable to bear the memories and the empty house, moved closer to her sister in another state, hoping for a fresh start away from the shadows of her son's death. Riverside, a community once defined by its tranquility and neighborly bonds, was forever changed. The Henderson Cooper tragedy became a cautionary tale, whispered among residents and serving as a stark reminder of the hidden turmoil that can lurk behind even the most seemingly perfect facades. The annual summer barbecues ceased, the once vibrant gatherings replaced by smaller, more subdued get-togethers. The house where the Hendersons had lived remained unsold for years, a silent testament to the violence that had shattered its walls. For Thaddeus, prison became a place of reflection and regret. Stripped of his business suits and the trappings of his former life, he was left alone with his thoughts and memories. He spent his days reading and participating in counseling sessions, trying to come to terms with the anger and ambition that had driven him to such a dark place. He wrote letters to Margot and Elaine, letters that went unanswered, but provided him some solace in expressing his remorse. As the years passed, Riverside slowly began to heal, though the scars remained. New families moved in, unaware of the full history of the events that had unfolded. Life continued, but the memory of that hot July day lingered, a ghostly presence that reminded everyone of the fragility of the human heart and the devastating consequences of unchecked passion and anger.